Hello, and welcome to Pivotal Moments HQ, a podcast sharing, exploring, and celebrating stories of change through mindset and wellness and their impact on relationships. We are all agents of change and have the power to pivot at any point, at any time. I'm your host, Melissa Robena, along with my co-host, Siria Gutierrez. On this episode, we start a new series on the reasons people resist change, starting with fear. We break down this fear into the fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of loss, and the fear of success. All right, it's been a minute since we have hosted or talked about a series.
Yes, I am so excited about doing this series because you're right, it has been a minute. But I was thinking about the series that we have done, right? We've talked about the types of pivots. We talked about reasons people would pivot. And I thought, well, we haven't talked about the resistance. Because there are a lot of people out there, you know them, I know them, Melissa knows them, who just do not want to change. And they may change, but they'll go kicking and screaming. So where does that come from? So we're doing a new series where we are going to talk about the top 5 reasons people resist changing. So you ready for these?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first reason, which we will do our deep dive into today, is fear. Fear. Then the next reason is mistrust. Then we'll be talking about the departure from the status quo. Then it'll be the individual's predisposition, which I'm actually really excited to talk about. And the final one is a loss of control. So those are the 5 things we're going to be getting into over the next 5 weeks. We're super excited about it. But today is all about fear.
I'm really excited. So when I was researching for this particular topic, it reminded me of the cognitive dissonance theory. Are you familiar? Well, I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, Siria.
Yes.
But for listeners, it's basically when a person experiences conflicting emotions, attitudes, behavior, or beliefs in any given situation. So when change is afoot, this can actually create mental discomfort within an individual. So in order to either reduce that discomfort and restore balance, we are typically required to either change the emotion, the attitude, behavior, or belief. And so I think that's when we're talking about fear, that's definitely, fits into one of the emotions or the attitudes that we have towards change.
Absolutely, it does. And when you're thinking about cognitive dissonance, think of it as you're telling your brain something, but you're doing something different. And so your brain doesn't like that. It doesn't like the difference. And so it's going to try to align itself to what you're actually saying. So if you keep saying, I work out, and you actually don't go work out, your brain's not going to like that because it's like, why do you keep saying that? It's almost like you're lying to your brain about what you're doing. It doesn't like it.
We actually have a mutual friend who came up to me and she said, I really want a new job, but it requires that I go back to school. And so she kept telling herself, I'm too old to go back to school, or, I've been out of school for too long. I'm sure you've, have friends that have said something similar. So this situation has actually caused her emotional distress because she's torn between a goal that she wants and a limiting belief that she keeps telling herself. So over time, it's like you kind of come to a crossroad, which is she either changes her belief that she's not too old to go back to school and that she can change her career, or she decides to just stay where she's at. But either way, whatever decision she makes, that discomfort that she's feeling will be reduced and, her mental balance will be restored.
Right. And we don't like being in that space.
No.
I think that's the big part of this. We don't like being in this space of uncertainty or this space where we are not aligned with what we think is basically what it is. And so where fear comes in on here is that fear is so good at holding you back from your greatness. What else would you like to say about fear? I know that's not the whole episode, but it holds you back in so many different ways. And I think there's fear of failure, which we can get into, and then there's also fear of success, which I know for sure we will get into, because these are the fears that we've been dealing with. And shedding light on these things is not an easy task. People don't like it.
Well, I know that for me, I dislike change. I'm not a big proponent of change because it diminishes my sense of control, which I know that we've talked about in previous episodes, which triggers fear because, if I can't control it, then It creates emotional imbalance. Like I don't feel like there is harmony in my world.
Okay. So what are different ways that fear has presented itself to you?
Well, for me, I feel like there are four types of failure. There's or
Failure
fear,
or fear?
sorry, fear. Sorry. I feel that there are four types of fear. There's the fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of loss, and then fear of success. And so the first one for me is fear of failure. Gosh, that is a
Fear of failure. Fear of failure.
that is a tongue twister.
F-f-f-f-f-f.
But for me, I mean, when I think of that, I think of imposter syndrome immediately, and I'm experiencing this from in my own personal life at the moment, actually, which is, so I had mentioned in a previous episode that I have a new company that I started, Pug Productions, and so I'm getting clients, and I've noticed that my sleep has been disrupted recently, and I couldn't figure out why, and my therapist actually pointed out that my lack of sleep, my insomnia actually started since Pug Production started to become successful. And she said it's the thoughts you're telling yourself, which are, am I going to meet my client's expectations? Am I really the right person for the job? Am I capable of meeting these deadlines? And, that people pleasing also kind of seems to surface too, which feeds into that fear of failure because I don't want to upset anyone, or heaven forbid, I don't live up to their expectations or deliver the quality of product or service that I say that I'm going to. So that fear of failure is real strong with me at the moment.
The thing with the fear of failure is that I think it's something that we all have. And I was actually fortunate enough to be at an event, workshop yesterday called Clear Confident You. And there, the host, Monica Vaughn, brought us through this whole process of how to get to your clear, confident statement. And one of the steps was to identify the fears. And the thing that I loved about this workshop is that the fears that everybody had were very similar. And fear of failure came up along with this opposite, the fear of success, right? So for fear of failure for me, let me finish that thought. With seeing all of these amazing, capable women doing all of these things, and just saying it out loud, it just kind of normalized the fact that, this is a normal fear that a lot of people have. For me, fear of failure has been more a fear of not doing something, because I'm not really afraid of failing so much as I'm afraid of not trying. And so, failing, I know, is a lesson for me. And so I would rather just not be in a position where I haven't tried something and then have regret, because I think that's worse.
How does a fear of not trying feed into fear of failure?
Well, fear of not trying is just being okay with being where I'm at, being okay with those things, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my personality to want to stay there. I'm constantly trying to learn. I'm constantly trying to grow, because these are things that fuel me. And so if I don't at least try something, that's worse for me, because it's, I'm going to regret not doing something. So I don't know that it feeds into the failure part so much, but that would be the failure, is the failure to try. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It does.
Yeah. So it's a little bit different, because I think I've come to a point where I know I have so much support. I have a great support system, and I'm very capable. So I'm not really afraid of a failure so much as I am of getting too big, and fear of success. That's definitely something that I am grappling with. Grappling
with a G.
With the g. Okay.
We cannot speak today.
Sometimes this stuff happens.
I think another kind of dovetailing off that fear of failure is the fear of the unknown. Oh my God, I can't even think about the possibility of failing if I don't even know what I'm jumping into.
Interesting. Because I feel like that goes into another episode that we're going to do on the 5 personality traits, because it goes into openness.
Yeah, I'm closed.
Yeah, and so for me, I'm pretty open. So it's like the fear of the unknown. I think I don't know. I'm trying to think if I have any examples of the doing something of the fear of the unknown. I can't think of anything because all that's coming to mind are situations where I've been in where I'm literally saying to myself, how the fuck did I get myself into this situation? And it's usually some sort of like high adventure type thing. So in one of the firm retreats, we did the alpine slides going down at Park City, Utah. And so like these are the things that I don't know. Do they have the alpine slides as part of the Olympics? Like I can't remember. Basically, you're going down on this like, plastic thing down another plastic tube at very high angles in these mountains in Utah. And all you have to protect you from the sharp turns and angles is this little tiny little break between your legs as you're, seated on this thing going, I don't know how many miles an hour, but I remember just going down this and I'm going through these turns and I'm like, how the fuck did I get here? And so there was an adrenaline rush in there and I was definitely afraid of doing it, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to try it because I'll at least try something once. I may not do that ever again, but I'll still remember that rush and then getting to the bottom and just being like, I can't believe I just did that. But halfway through, right? And that's usually where it hits me. It's I'm halfway through something and it's like, how the fuck did I get myself into this?
I think that that's a little bit different because, I mean, when it comes to stuff like that, I feel like I'd be more apt to try. But when it comes to either considering going back to school, getting a new career, ending a relationship, I don't know what, is going to happen. So if I ended a relationship or started a new career, for example, what other career would I have? What would the pay be like? Would I have the same flexibility? And it's our degree of resistance is basically determined by whether, like, we as individuals perceive that change to be good or bad. And so if I don't know if the change is good or bad, I'm just going to assume the worst. And so that then creates this paralysis of where it's like, it's safer to be in a situation that I'm familiar with. I may hate it. I may be unhappy, but that's typically where I've been. Now that's something that I'm currently working on because it's something I'm aware of, but definitely that fear of unknown is a huge driving factor for me.
Well, I think what you're touching on too is that negative bias that we all carry. It's so much easier to think if I do these things, it's going to be the worst thing ever. And I try very hard to not think of that and just, or be aware of it at least. Like I definitely think of it, but like being aware of, oh, here's my negative bias popping up saying fear of the unknown. And I'm just, I don't know. I think I'm just more open to trying some of these things, and which is why I find myself in those situations where I'm like, how the fuck did I end up here? And I have to give myself that moment where it's like, Siria, every decision you've ever made has led to this moment right now, whatever this is. And I have a couple of those, and one of them is that alpine slide.
I'm sorry, my mind totally went to sexual in nature, so I do apologize.
Of course it did. Of course it did.
But in addition to that, another fear, though, is fear of loss. And so the biggest fear in terms of when I think of this is, fear that I'm going to lose my connection to the past. I know that some people, fear that they'll lose their identity or anything like that. But I think about like when I moved away from home, when I went to university, I was afraid that I'd lose those connections, that maybe the closeness that I had with my siblings would be diminished. So there was like that sense of loss.
Was it a loss of your connection to them or your connection to yourself, like a loss of identity?
Maybe a little bit of both, but I know that I'm, in a previous episode where we talked about enmeshed families, at that point, especially when I was, just starting to not sever those ties, but to kind of find myself, it was definitely the loss of those relationships. And that was, again, just perceived. But that I was definitely fearful that by not being present and that those relationships would somehow be diminished or not as strong as they were before.
Okay. No, I could see that. And especially because family is such a high value for you, that idea of, hey, I'm leaving and somehow I'm going to lose my family, like that could be really hard. But, you still did it. How is it to come out of the other end and knowing that you moved away and you're still in a good spot?
Oh, it's good. I really like it. But It was interesting when I was looking at loss of identity, because I couldn't necessarily relate to that, but it reminded me of when my mother, like all of her kids were grown. And so all of us left the house, and this was the first time. She always said, like, oh, I can't wait for you guys to get out of the house. I'm like, oh, okay. And, but really there was a fear because she was known, her identity was, okay, you're Melissa's mom, or you're the mom of 4 kids, or you're the Robana clan, whatever. So that was her identity. And she didn't know who she was outside of that because she was a parent at a young age. And so now with all of us out of the house, it was like, well, who am I now? So there was that change that happened, created this loss of identity for her momentarily. I mean, she's since found it, but that was definitely resisting change. Why she was kind of hesitant having her kids leave was because then there was that sense of loss.
Yeah, I think a lot of us grapple with that loss of identity, especially when we tie that identity to something we do rather than to how we want to be. And so if, for example, with your mom, right, if her whole identity was being a mom, well, that's still part of her. But at some point, you're not a mom with small kids anymore. Your kids grow up, they start elementary school, they start middle school, and they move forward in life the way everybody's going to. So tying too much of your identity in that one aspect of it can be very difficult to let go of once those things we all know it's going to happen. They're all going to, hopefully graduate high school. If they go on to college, cool. If not, I'm just going to say it's okay because there's, we're slightly overeducated in this country. But anyways, that's another topic for another day.
Are we though? But we'll go into a rabbit hole with that one.
We'll go into a whole rabbit hole. It is another thing, but it is something that that certain things are going to happen, right? And then the other things are the unknown. You don't necessarily know what your kid's sexual orientation is going to be. You don't know, frankly, how long they're going to live. It's true. I've got plenty of clients that have lost their kids, unfortunately. You don't know how they're going to develop. You hope for the best. You want to hope for those positive things to happen to them. But you don't know if they're going to get married. You don't know if they're going to get divorced. Like, you can't protect them like you do when they're teeny tiny little things.
I would see how that would generate a ton of fear and a ton of anxiety, which for me, I've experienced recently with the last of the fears, which is fear of success.
Oh, yeah. The fear of success. That's a big one. I think the fear of success is, for me, it's twofold. One of them is, am I thinking too highly of myself and it's actually not something that's going to happen? And am I being too gullible? And the other one, how much is it going to change me? Am I going to be able to still stay rooted in my values, be a good provider at that point? Because I feel like success means that you can create jobs and help other people. And, is it going to change you? Is money going to corrupt? Because that's also the other part of success.
I would definitely
kind of fear of money.
I would definitely let's just test it out. I'm going to put forth that I want a ton of money and we'll see if it corrupts me.
Okay.
I'm putting that vibe out there.
Well, are you proud of how you got it?
We don't need to talk about that. We're on air right now. But I think when I think of fear of success, kind of, adding to what you're saying is that, as I mentioned earlier, Pug Productions is slowly starting to gain momentum. And it's like, oh my God, if it keeps going this way, how am I going to maintain the level of output? Do I need to hire people? What are the growing pains? Am I going to be able to handle it and maintain it? And will I lose myself in the process? And so there is this huge fear of success. And one thing that, we often tend to do without even realizing it is self-sabotage. Yes. Even if it's things that we want, we almost get in our own way that hinders our best intentions and goals. Have you ever found yourself self-sabotaging your work?
100%. I mean, it's something that I think we all kind of do, where it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to do this thing, even though you need to do the thing. whatever that thing is. You know you need to do it, but you're not doing it because, it's going to make the next step real, or it's going to bring in something else that maybe you just don't want to deal with, right? So, if you don't want to have a successful business, and it really depends on what success means to you too, right? But I think the success we're talking about is being big and being our businesses and having this grow to something that can really change our lives and others. And so I think that can definitely be a scary thing to do, but I also think it's a good indicator that you're onto something. And so that has to do with the coaching work that I've been doing, because your saboteur wants to keep you small. Your inner critic, your inner gremlin, whatever you want to call it, they want to keep you small, because keeping you small is keeping you safe. And that is, the safety stuff. And we picked this stuff up in childhood, right? And so if there were certain things that you were doing where it was safer to not have all of the answers, not be the Hermione Granger in your class answering everything, even if you knew everything, right? Because you didn't want to get made fun of. So your inner gremlin would be like, nope, how about you put that hand down? You don't need to answer every single question. And so you keep yourself small. And so now, though, we're adults. And so we don't have to listen to that voice anymore. That voice has zero place in the driver's seat. It's never going to go away. It's going to be like that stain in your car that you keep trying to wash out, but you just can't. That's what it's going to be. Melissa's looking at me like I'm crazy because she's like, I don't like spill things in my car because I'm so perfect. So but it's one of those things where it's always going to be with you, but you have to learn how to quiet down that voice, because if you're afraid of this, you might be onto something.
So those are the different types of fears that I came across. Mm-hmm. I didn't know if there was any that you kind of thought of, or if you even have any techniques or solutions of maybe how to combat this fear that we might feel.
It's really interesting. So the workshop, along with the work that I've been doing with From Hostage to Hero, talks about fears. And one of the ways to do that is really doing basically something that you would consider out of AI, the appreciative inquiry, in terms of flipping things. So in Hostage to Hero, we make our fears list of what we're afraid the jury is going to look at is bad. And then you flip it to, they're not going to like my client. You flip it to, they're going to love my client. Or I'm afraid that my client was, I don't know, or that I'm asking for too much money. Then you flip it to, I'm asking for the right amount of money. And really you have to focus on that solution and the positive opposite, which is something that you do a lot of in AI. Mm-hmm. So being able to just flip that and knowing what it is. And I think that even just making that list, one of my fears that I came up with at this workshop was not getting clients. Well, I already know that's not true because I already have clients, right? So it's like sometimes you have these fears that when you really sit down and look at it logically, it can't be true. Like, the fear of having wasted my time. All of this is a valuable lesson. Like, there is no waste for me if I'm doing things daily that are with intention and with how I want to be living my life. That's not a waste. Somebody else may not like it. They may think that it's a waste because it's not how they're doing something, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, and it being in alignment with what my goals and values are.
What I like about your flipping technique, because as we've mentioned in previous episodes, it's just that social constructionism. What we tell ourselves becomes our reality. And so I love putting pen to paper, writing down what your fears are, and then flipping it. And then, even taking it a step further, which is making the flip your, like a mantra, so to speak. And you say that every morning, or you say that when you need to, once a day, or when you're closing out the day. And then you'll slowly start to shift those thoughts from fear to possibility.
Right, exactly. So like one of the things that comes up is like, oh, this is too hard. And I picked this up from another group that I'm in. And it's like, I can do hard things. It's like, fuck yeah, I can do hard things. So if something comes up that's hard, that's immediately what the thought that I want to choose to think is, I can do hard things. Because that is going to serve me way better than sitting there ruminating over the fact that this is too damn hard and I can't do it. Like, yeah, I can sit in that place of suck for a really long time. I think all of us are capable and have been able to do that, but it doesn't serve any of us, right? So it's like, okay, well, I can experience that. I can feel it and then go, okay, what do I want to choose to think instead? And then move to that. We want to hear from you. What one fear can you flip into a positive affirmation? Let us know on our Instagram at Pivotal Moments HQ. We want to thank our producer and music director, Ron Johnson. This has been an Astronomicus DMR production. Thank you for listening, and remember, it's never too late and you're right on time.